Thank you so much for joining us today. Some of you, our frequent flyers, know the drill. We love to know where everybody's coming from today, especially if you're coming from outside New York or outside the US. So please drop it in the chat. We'd love to see. Welcome, everybody. All right, I'm going to get started as more people are filtering in with our introduction. Hello from the Jersey Shore, Grace. Good evening, everyone. My name is Maya Locker, and I'm the Programs and Events Coordinator here with the Museum at Eldridge Street. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual program with artist Tobi Kahn on the meditative spaces that he's been creating for communities and the meetings and motivations behind them. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go. There will be an official Q&A at the end where you can unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you have to Tobi. But throughout, if there are any questions that I feel are time sensitive, I will interrupt and ask those questions. So please feel free to put those in the chat, or I'll get to those questions at the end and ask them for you during the Q&A. For those who haven't visited us before, the museum at Eldridge Street is housed in the historic Eldridge Street Synagogue. We were built in 1887, and it was the first grand synagogue built by Eastern European Jews in the US. We were nearly lost to neglect in the mid-20th century before our massive restoration project restored the space to its former glory and for public use for wonderful things like this exhibition. We offer both in-person and virtual programming at Eldridge Street, and you can find all of our public programming listed on our website at eldridgestreet.org/events, and I'll put this link in the chat after this intro. Keep in mind, we have another program from Tobi next month on October 1st for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. So please give that a look and register. We also have a bunch of walking tours coming up and an in-person and a virtual program, on a book all about gangsters and the birth of the American underworld on the Lower East Side. So please check that out as well. That's coming up on September 24th, and Tobi's next program is October 1st. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening, Tobi Kahn. Tobi is a painter and sculptor whose art has been shown in over 70 solo museum exhibitions. Works by Kahn are in major museum collections globally, including the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, the Phillips Collection, and the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. To learn more about Tobi, please visit his website at tobikahn.com. And with that, I'm going to turn the screen over to Tobi. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
Well, it's a real honor to be here. And before I start, I want to say something about a wonderful friend of mine named Mark Podwell, who just left the world. He has a beautiful floor installation. He did a mosaic at Eldridge Street, and we had always talked about doing an exhibition together, whether in Prague or in America. And last year, when we knew that my show would be up and his floor would be completed, we both were thrilled about that. So I want to say, may his soul be blessed. I spoke to his son today, and I said I'd be mentioning him tonight. So I'm thinking of the wonderful Mark Podwell. So with that, I'd like to start, since this is a part of the exhibition Memory and Inheritance at Eldridge Street. We decided to have different works in the exhibition and talk about them specifically. And one of the things that has always interested me is meditative spaces. And what do meditative spaces mean? That means a space where you go to and hopefully something happens to you by seeing the work. This work could be much larger than you, and this work can also be something that you hold in your hand. So I'm showing you all pieces that are in the exhibition, but taking them from different vantage points. So let's start with the first image. And Maya, thank you so much for doing this. So this is one of the most important pieces I've done in my life. This was commissioned by Father Walter Smith. This is called Emet. And if you ask me, are some of these names based on Hebrew words? They are. Sometimes they're more literal and sometimes they're less literal. I have to thank my wife, the writer Nessa Rappaport, for helping me come up with every name for every project. And right after 9/11, Father Walter Smith came to me, and they had a beautiful building called the HealthCare Chaplaincy in the 60s. And he said, I really want you to create a meditative space for me. And I said, Walter, what is a meditative space? And he said to me, well, we have a chapel. What is a meditative space to you? And I said, well, in our faith, you need a quorum. You need 10 people to make a minyan. So let me make a space that only technically easily fits 9 people. And I'd always loved Doug Wheeler, an amazing artist. And most of you know who James Turrell is, but there's Doug Wheeler, who has a show on right now downtown. Robert Irwin, another great artist. And I'm fascinated by light artists. So this was not done that the light could come from the ceiling, because there was another floor above it and then a roof. So I decided to move the space down 9 inches and create a space where you could have different types of light. And you have a daylight in there, you have tungsten light, you have fluorescent light, you have all different types of light. And when you close the room, this room was on a whole floor, you get ambient light from outside the doors. I worked with creating sets for Joe Papp at the Public Theater. I worked with Elizabeth Swados, and I learned about something called theatrical foam. And what I did is the chairs have seats on them with leather coming over theatrical foam. So when you leave the room, your body imprint is still there. So I felt that your meditation in the space, there are 3 chairs, and then there are 2 benches that each could hold 3 people. And I wanted a sky and water, so you feel like you're in holiness, because I've always believed sky and water is a very holy interaction. And the chairs have, on the backs of each of the 3 chairs, are an image based on a cell. And when cells separate, they have that beautiful globe feeling. I'm very interested in fractal geometry and how images repeat in nature. So the space is really about the sky and water. And Walter had said to me, can you have places to put prayer books, or a Tanakh, a Christian Bible, a Quran, and all different holy books? And I said, if it's meditation, I'll leave a space outside that you can have the books outside, but I want, if you're going to have the book, it's in your lap or in your hands. So this is what we're starting with. Let's go to the next image. So I know it takes a minute. So here is an interesting aside. If anyone knows my work, I usually do not put mountains in my sky and water installations. But Walter said to me, this is right after September 11th, people need sometimes to focus on something when they're meditating. And even though I know you want your sky and water to just be the line, would you mind putting on the 2 side areas, because there are 9 panels, 3 in the front that have no imagery in it, and other than the sky and the water, and the 2 on the side, one has 1 mountain and the other has 2 mountains. Now, people have told me over the years that it reminds them of the way Martha's Vineyard looks from Woods Hole. And I said, that is so interesting. For around 30 years, I've been spending time at Woods Hole with my closest friend who's a scientist, and I didn't do it consciously, but it was a subconscious decision. And you can see and hear how different the lighting is. And it feels like there's an opening in the sky, but that is a dome. I created a dome so you would see no corners. So that is the first of the sacred spaces that I wanted to share with you tonight, or meditative spaces. Now we're going to get to the second one. And this was a project that I did in 1993. I had the great honor of meeting Jane Blaffer Owen. The Blaffer family has the Blaffer Museum in Houston. And I met her through another Jesuit priest named Father Terry Dempsey, who did his doctoral research in Berkeley under Peter Sels. He spent a lot of time studying my work. And when the Museum Mokra opened in St. Louis, he asked me to be in that first exhibition. And I had some of my small shrines, meditative spaces that I made that were maybe 12 inches tall. And I met Jane Blaffer Owen, and she saw one of those and said to me, my husband is from a descendant of the Owen family, the first utopian society in America, and I commissioned artists to do projects there. I did the Roofless Church with Philip Johnson, and I had Richard Myers do a building. I had Jacques Lifshitz do a piece for In There. I'd like you to do a piece for New Harmony. And she saw this small sculpture that was, 12. Oh, it's right behind me. In fact, see if you can see me in here. This is the model that she saw. It was a small bronze. And she said, why don't we make it large? And it's made out of granite and bronze. And we picked a piece of land in the town that floods once a year. It's by the Wabash River. And it floods once a year. And I wanted the piece, I've always been interested in the work of many artists, but who talk about the fact that a sculpture should look different all the way around. If you think about somebody like Giacometti or Henry Moore, what I love about Giacometti is Giacometti said, everything that you take away is what's important, even more important than what's left. And Henry Moore said, what makes a great sculpture is if it looks different from all the way around. And I took that a little further and thought it should look different all year from the front and the back. So it only floods for 1 month a year. So it's granite and bronze, and it was created in 1993, which is over 30 years ago. And many people, it's a destination for people to get married. So let's go to the next image. So in the exhibition, we have 6 of my monumental pieces that we couldn't show in the museum. I'm very honored to be at Eldridge Street, but it's a much more intimate space than most of the museums I showed in. And when I talked to the curator there, I said, it's important for me that people who come to the museum see that I do large outdoor pieces as well. So on one of the walls in the museum, we have 6 large photographs of different outdoor large scale meditative pieces or holy pieces that I create. So now you can see inside. Again, it only floods once a year, and it's not because of global warming. This is the Wabash River every year for over 30 years, comes up there, and we picked a piece of land that it comes all around it, but doesn't cover it. And during most of the year, we have something called buffalo grass, which it never has to be mowed. And Jane calls it Angel of Mercy. What I love about it, it reminds me very much, it was a conscious decision. I was thinking a lot about Stonehenge, big influence on me. And if you've never seen Stonehenge, it's in England, and it's an ancient holy space. A funny aside was when I created this piece, I went to South Dakota to find the granite that I liked, and then I fabricated it in Chicago. And I was very conscious that even though the stone could have been totally straight, I wanted it to look like I found it that way. And there's stainless steel rods that go through it. And because it floods once a year, there's a 15-foot underground cement and wire that keeps it in place. And there are bolts on the top that keep it in there. So, all right, this is number 2. Let's go on to the next one. So I wanted to go from here. I've done 2 Holocaust memorials in my life. This is the second one I did. The first one I did was in New Jersey at the JCC in Tenafly. And this was a Holocaust commission I was asked to do in La Jolla, California. And what was interesting about this project was they gave me a certain amount of land. It was on public land, but it was paid for by Holocaust survivors, people whose family went through the Shoah. And if you see those doors over there, it's in front of a kindergarten class. So I knew that I could not do something that would scare the kids every day because they come through this garden. And I wanted it to be specific to La Jolla. So the first thing I did is I wanted to know how many people in La Jolla or San Diego, which is, they're part of each other, how many people had descendants there. And it was frightening to see that there were over 10,000 people who wrote in names of people that were killed in their family. And I wanted to include everyone. And I worked with a local gravestone creator to get large pieces of granite. And for $18, 18 means life, $18, every person could have their families' names on there, and we divided it into sections of 9. I'm very committed to the number 3. There's a beautiful statement in Hebrew: the world stands on 3 things: the study of sacred texts, worship, and good works. And so many of my pieces that I make, whether they're large scale or intimate, I think of that number 3 a lot. So it's 3 times 3. I originally wanted that figure that you see in the front to have an eternal light, but again, because there were children there, I had to turn it into water. Also, because there are children there, everything had to be glued down to the bottom, so there are no loose rocks. The water couldn't be less than a half an inch, because kids, otherwise, God forbid, could put their faces in the water and something bad would happen. So we had a pump hidden behind some trees and rocks that continually circulated the water, so that it looks like the water has a little brook there going through this garden. There are paths all the way around it, and on the rocks themselves, they have the names of the camps where people were deported, and from people from La Jolla's, their families were deported. And these are all different rocks with engravings on the rocks from those different places. The wall in front of you has the names of all the people that were killed. And then there's another wall that you don't see here with all the righteous people of the world who hid people in La Jolla. And then on another wall on the side, there's the whole history of when the Nazis took power until the end of the war. The interesting thing you'll notice is there's a beautiful tree on the right side. That is an olive tree. But because there are children there again, I had to get a hybrid olive tree that has no pits so that kids couldn't choke. So when people say to me, this was such a powerful project, what was the hardest part? And I said, well, the hardest part is finding a tree that looked like an olive tree that didn't have olives. So let's go to and then there's a young figure beseeching with their arms up, beseeching in other words, Mother Earth, giving water to reheal all the survivors. And there's a beautiful lighting system at night. So that is, I wanted you to see that is the history that Nessa, my wife, helped put together. There's a beautiful meditation on the top, and then it gives the whole history of how the war took place. It was a very important thing because it's on public land. It was not only allowed to be about the Jewish people, it had to be open to everyone. What was fascinating was that all 10,000 names were Jewish, but this talks about everything, including, just the whole history of the war. Very important when you get a project, and I think people should understand that you're given certain ramifications, certain things of boundaries of what you're supposed to do. And I think the most exciting thing as an artist is find ways to make it happen and fulfill all the needs that you have to do. Let's go to the next one. So this is a synagogue I did in Milwaukee. I'm very proud of it. It's called Temple Emmanuel B'nai Jeshurun. And I got this project through Nancy Cole-Spiro, who I knew through the many years ago. She and I were both involved in the National Foundation for Jewish Heritage, and her husband Herzl Spiro was the president. And they came to me and said, "We're redoing a synagogue. We want you to do it." I said, "Are there any conditions?" And she said, "Well, the only thing I want you to do is, I love your metallics. I want you to do it in white and gold and white and silver." It made my life fascinating to do. I was excited. It was wonderful. These are murals. And originally they asked me, would I do something based on the 7 days of creation? And I said, I did a building in Connecticut. I did a synagogue there of that. I really don't want to repeat myself. How about if I just do it on different aspects of what creation means? And we came to an agreement, and I'm so proud of it. The ark doors open, and right above there, there's a Ner Tamid, an eternal light. And for all of you that might not know this, the earliest Jewish symbol is not a Star of David or a menorah, it is a pomegranate. So they had told me that this synagogue could be seen from the highway also, from the outside. So I said, why not do the eternal light in that little circle above the Aron? And you can see it from inside and outside. And I wanted to have 100 small lights, so it wasn't one light. And that lights it looks almost like the top of the pomegranate. There's a bowl there, and it's floating light. It was an amazing project to work on, and I've been told by many people that they remember their bar and bat mitzvahs being there. They've been at funerals there. They've been at weddings there. And what people tell me, which means a lot to me, is that depending on how they feel at a given time is what image they concentrate on. I'm very proud of them. If you get a chance to go to Milwaukee, I hope you get to go there. And I also have to say that Anna Heller was the director of the Biblical Museum in New York. And this became, I made 6-foot versions of this. This became the centerpiece of a museum I had 20 years ago in New York. It's a beautiful show. If you want to see aspects of it, CBS did a small piece on it. If you Google, it's on my website. There's like a 4-minute piece that shows all the works that were in that exhibition. Let's go to the next. So all of these, this is the close-up of the Aron and the menorahs, which are like the menorahs looked in the Holy of in the Mishkan, but not in, it's not for a Hanukkah. These were very powerful to make. I really love making them, and it's very simple. Those are not there anymore, but everything else is there. Let's go to the next. So if anyone knows my work, sky and water is by far the thing I spent more time on than anything else that I do. This was from a museum show at the University of Maryland. It also was shown at the museum in Philadelphia. It's one piece. It's 30 images of sky and water, all at the same horizon line. But what interests me is this is, for me, pure meditation. And every time I do a museum show, I make sure there's one bench that in front of all my sky and waters where you can sit and meditate and think about the absolute glory of God and nature. People say to me often, are all of these really places where that are sky and water? And I say, well, sometimes it's the smog. And I don't like smog, but I feel like, why not do something beautiful once it exists? So they are usually water and sky. Sometimes they're land and sky, but most of them are, and they're in places like Buffalo, has the gray and white ones, and some of them are in Greece, and some of them are in Israel, and some of them are in California, and they're in all different places. The water is not always the ocean. Sometimes it's a large lake. I did a whole series in Chicago by Lake Michigan. I've done pieces where I'm on people's boats, and you're in the high seas, and you see it like that. And what's interesting to me is the juxtaposition of all these pieces. If you've ever seen my show at the Albright Knox or the Newburger, I've done 7 museum shows of just sky and water. I've never done one in New York City, and I hope one day I do. I mean, I've done a small thing at the JCC, but that wasn't a museum show. That was just an installation. All right, let's go to the next one. So all of these that you've seen, this is the last one of these. These are on the wall at Eldridge Street. And these are the last ones you're seeing. And these are just photographs. So you understand that a lot of my art practice is larger outdoor scale pieces as well. So this I just finished in May. I'm very proud of it. I worked on it for 2 years. It's in front of the new Honigman Center at Jefferson University. It's a hospital. And when I talked to the then president of the hospital, he said, I really love your work. I want you to do something specifically for our hospital. And I said, tell me, what do you want people to feel like when they come in. And he said, well, I want them to feel that we are here to save lives. We're here to help people feel better. And I said, wow, I like that idea. And how do you want it to look different all the way around? They said, well, we're on a corner and we want it to look different when you come in from one street and another street. And we want it to look different through the glass windows and doors when you leave. So I immediately thought most of my outdoor bronzes are either in stone. I'm sorry, most of my outdoor sculptures are either in stone or bronze and stone. And I thought I had started working with aluminum. And what I love about aluminum is that the light hits it in very different ways. And I wanted to have these 3 pieces. This is the largest outdoor sculpture I've done. These are 25 feet. And it's in a little overhang from the museum that's 26 feet. And I want to do a shout out to the guy I worked with. It was very hard to install. It took us a half a day because I wanted it to look like it was always there. So you have to understand, you have to move a sculpture in on an angle so that it can sit there and look that way. And I wanted the lighting on the bottom to feel like it's emanating light from the ground. If you look at it all different times of the day, I worked with an amazing engineer, and we looked at how the light changes on that corner all year round. Very different in the winter and very different in the summer. And if you see, it feels like it's brushed metal. And sometimes they look like they're holes, but it's a solid works. But the way the light hits it, it really varies greatly. On the taller piece on the left, I worked very hard, and we have a very strong support underneath. I wanted it to look very fragile. The middle piece, I wanted it to look very solid. The piece on the right, I wanted to feel like it was mirroring the piece, but the one on the left, I wanted to feel like I was leaning in. And to me, again, I thought a lot about Stonehenge, and I also thought about looking at Cycladic work. Cycladic work was done 5,000 years ago in the Greek islands, and I wanted it to feel very large, but also intimate. And I wanted you to feel like you're coming to this hospital for healing, and I wanted you to feel the surface of like almost the skin, that you could feel there was something pulsating in there. Now we have finished with the large pieces that are in the exhibition, and now we're going to go to smaller pieces. I wanted to go straight to a piece that's never been shown before. I've done many baby naming chairs, and if I have to think about what a meditative space means, having a baby, you're holding the baby for the baby naming. It's a meditative holy space. So this is the first baby naming chair that I created. It was done in 2020. It took me 2 years, from 2020 to 2022. Until now, all the baby naming chairs I did were either for boys or for girls. And I really started thinking about the fact that if a baby is born, I want it for every baby. I don't want to divide and do anything differently. The image in the middle is the inside of an orchid. Orchids are something that I think are beautiful because you see the inside and the outside of a living piece. So I wanted the back of the chair to have that. And if you look at the legs, the front legs are much wider apart than the back legs. And yes, it is a shout out to Renee McIntosh and Frank Lloyd Wright. I admire their work greatly, but I wanted conceptually, I wanted, if a child comes into the world, I want any of them to feel like they could bring their past with them and it wouldn't get in the way of their present. So if you conceptually fold this chair and you have the inside back legs, don't get in the way of the outside larger legs, so that the baby comes into the world and they bring their life with them. On the back of this orchid painting, there is a panel that's painted in gold, and every person that will use the chair will be able to have their name written on the back. Let's go to the next one. We can go to the next slide. So this, whoops, go back one. This next piece is a sculpture that I did for the Shoah, for the Holocaust. It is a very small piece. It's only 20 inches tall. It's meant to be when you have the yard site and memorizing people who died in the Holocaust. I wanted you to be able to have it indoors. And I plan one day to do a very large piece like that also outdoors. This is leaving on for a show opening at the Frankfurt Museum in the beginning of November. It's leaving. This is the only piece that's leaving the exhibition at Eldridge Street this coming Sunday because it's going to another museum show. And I wanted to talk about the fact that when you make a memorial light, it should tell a story about what the memorial's for. So when I've made memorial lights for 9/11, I've made memorial lights. We'll see the next one for people that have miscarriages. I've done it for people that have lived a long life and lived to be in their 90s. I think each memorial light that I create, it's very important for me that when you look at the image, it's the beginning of your conversation. I believe art is complete only when the viewer gets involved. So as much as I enjoy making art, it's important for me to have people see the art and bring their memory and inheritance to that project. This is made, it's carved wood, it's cast in bronze. This one is the wood piece, and I wanted it to look very much like pewter, which is different. I very often do pieces in bronze, sometimes in green bronze, but this to me, I wanted to look like it was almost burnt. And it looks very different all the way around. It looks like a flame. The body is a body, but it's all, all moved around very tightly. And you can see that there are wings that are like hands because these are for the people that were killed. And I think anyone who was killed during the Holocaust became angels. And therefore their hands went out and felt more like wings of birds than anything else. So every piece I do, I'm a conceptual artist. It's very important for me to tell a story, but it's very important for me. If you see this differently, I am not upset at all. I want you to bring your own history to anything you see of mine. All right, we'll go to the next one. This was a project that I did because so many friends of ours, unfortunately, had miscarriages. And so many people asked me, this is in 2003, this is 20 years ago. And many people said to me, we want you to make something for the lives that never happened. And it was very powerful for me because usually when you have a memory of a person, you know all the experiences with them. These miscarriages, they never really lived. They died before they were given birth to. So I wanted it to feel, this is one of the pieces that is important to me. There's no candle in there. It's important to me that the people that have them, this is one of the few pieces, this and the 9/11 piece that I did, a memorial light, I did more than 7 pieces of because so many people wanted to own them. This you hold in your hand and you take your one hand and hold it, and you can put your other hand inside the area that could be construed as a womb, where that, you can feel it's a half circle egg type feel, a shape. I wanted you to feel that loss of something that actually never came into being. And there it was important to me that the outside area is a bronze patina that's bluish and greenish, and the inside is more of a bronze color. Like it was a very powerful piece to make, and it's been in quite a few museum shows, but I put this together with other pieces in this exhibition. I hope you get to see the exhibition. I'm very proud of how the show looks at Eldridge Street. Let's go to the next one. So all the works you're seeing are there. Now, this was a very exciting project to do. I made this in 1993. So that is 30 years ago. This is one of the oldest pieces in the show, as is the sculpture that I did for New Harmony, Indiana. I've always loved the Eldridge Street Museum, never thinking I'd have a show there or that they would commission me to do the mezuzahs there. I was down at Eldridge Street for friends of mine's baby namings and wedding, all different things. But I remember seeing the windows at Eldridge Street and those other doors. I made this chamsa. Chamsa is a to ward off evil spirits. It's a Sephardi tradition and also an Arab tradition, but I've made many chamsas in my life. But when we decided to have the exhibition at Eldridge Street, I said, wow, I want to show this piece. I never dreamt that it would be shown at the museum. It looks very much like the windows looked at Eldridge Street when a lot of the glass was blown out. And I feel it's so wonderful to have it shown there when the museum / old sanctuary is in such beautiful, it's totally been redone. Let's go to the next. Wow. Is that,
That
oh,
seems
that's the last one, right. So I wanted to give time for people to ask questions, and then we'll go back to the images. That's really my goal. So we can move back and forth and ask any questions you want. Please don't be shy.
all right. I do have a few in my direct messages, and
Okay.
I have a few of my own as well. So the first question that I have is, you showed both, you have one example of furniture and also larger pieces. What's the fabrication process like for these furniture and large pieces?
So the large pieces originally were all done in, so I used to do everything in my studio, and that's why the outdoor sculptures were never bigger than 15 feet, because I couldn't get them through my door. So Shalev, other than Shalev was done, the sculpture was done in my studio, and the stone was done in a foundry. So I did different elements of it. The larger work now, I work with fabricators, like that 25-foot piece. I worked with a fabricator. I make a small model that is, I always start with a model that's around 12 to 15 inches. And then I usually do one that's around 6 feet, just to see if it's working the way I want. And then I bring those over and I have drawings done and I have it fabricated then by a fabricator. The chairs now, the early chairs I did, which I didn't show because they're not in this exhibition, were constructed totally in my studio. But now, like the one that I showed you here, I have now decided I want to have more of my work in the world. And so now I work with a fabricator where I bring the original and then I can do quite a few. And the only part in that new chair that I did in my studio on my own was the painting in the background. So it's based on the drawings and studies I did, but then it's actually fabricated by a fabricator, and that's made out of mahogany.
Thank you so much. And I have another one now. And again, everyone, feel free to either direct message me questions or you can put them publicly in the chat, whatever your preference. I have, how does working across faiths influence your work?
So I believe in God deeply. I am very proud to be an observant Jew. I don't like denominations, but I am an observant Jew. I keep Shabbat and I put on tefillin every day and I keep kosher, and I like that. But I believe deeply, and that's one of the reasons I loved showing at Eldridge Street. I believe great art takes from who you are and presents it, be as personal as you can be, but give it an audience that could be universal. So I have many, many close patrons. In fact, until a few years ago, my largest patrons were all people that were not of the Jewish faith. And I'm very proud now that I have people from every faith and denominations. And I work with people that don't believe in God, but like that my work has a sacred feeling to it. I work with a lot of hospitals. I'm very committed to making art. My goal is that you feel better about yourself when you leave, and that it gives you a feeling of kedusha, which is holiness. I want there to be holiness in my work. That is really important to me.
Thank you so much. We have a question about the Chamsa. Why the 3 circles, she asks.
Oh, so that was at Eldridge Street. Maya, you know that in the building, they have quite a few places that had 3 holes. I mean, I really took that from Eldridge Street. And that's what's so funny about it is, Maya, do you notice that from some of the windows in the building?
Yeah, definitely. It's giving our Moorish windows, Moorish architectural
I
windows.
stole it from, I mean, I never dreamt I'd show there. I just did it because I loved it so much. And I felt so sad that the building was in such ill repair. I didn't know, as I'm sure many people didn't know, that one day it would be so breathtaking. So this, I feel like, was a precursor and a prayer. Maybe this was actually a prayer that one day the synagogue / museum would come back to its original glory. So thank you, person who asked me that. When Nancy came over to my studio and she saw that, she says, that reminds me so much of Eldridge Street. And I said, Nancy, it's on my wall in my studio. I said, Nancy, it is. And she said, that has to be in the show. So yes, and if you come down to the museum, you'll see that I did a set of mezuzahs for Eldridge Street. And I thought a lot about those circular stones that were in the windows. So I like that things happen over 30 years, and that the new mezuzahs I did were just now. It's 30 years later.
Now we know phase 1 of our restoration was you making. And talking about Nancy Johnson, our curator, Nancy asks, what's next? Are you working on any big projects right now?
So I'm very happy to say I'm working on many big projects right now. I'm working on a project that hasn't been funded yet, and I hope it is going to be funded. I want to create a meditative room, the same size. I don't know if any of you know that I did a sukkah that was created for, there's no image of it in the show, so I couldn't put it into this lecture, for the JCC on the West Side. And I want to do a room that you feel like you're immersed in water, but it's dry. And I'd like it to be a place that you can sit and meditate and feel like you're in water. And it's very important that the top, it's going to be, I want to do 3 of them around the world. I want you to feel like you're inside the water, but you're not wet. And I was very inspired by Kusama, who did her endless rooms, but it's not what I wanted to do. And I don't want actual water in there. But the way I have lighting in the space, the lighting comes from above, and it's the top, again, is not open, but it feels like light is emanating from outside inside. And when you close the door, you can't fit more than 9 people in there. So if you know, I did the healthcare chat. I'm very committed to spaces that are not large enough to have a quorum, but it can fit 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. That's one of the projects I'm doing now. I'm also working on a series of images that are based on flowers. I started doing that a while ago, but now I'm concentrating that on, I did a show on that, but I want to do more of that. I'm also revisiting sky and water and in the exhibition, there's the first one of those. I'm doing them all blue and blue. And because I find blue, first of all, I think it's a Jewish color, and second of all, it's a very healing color. So I'm doing more work like that. I'm working on some other meditative pieces that, again, I hope will be interfaith. So yes, the studio, I'm very lucky, is quite large. It's 2 floors, and I always work on at least a half a dozen projects at a time.
You're just a little bit busy, is the answer.
Yeah, right.
Well, you mentioned meditative spaces again, and that's the theme of this whole talk, of course, but we have a question. Can you walk us through your kind of ritual for your creating? Do you have any specific rituals or routines for your creative process?
So, this is fun because in 1985, I was in an exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum. And right after that, one of the teachers in the neighborhood right near there asked me to come and teach. It was called the Hunter School. Hunter had a kindergarten, and the teacher, she had a great name. I can't remember her name, something Daisy. But she said, would you come into the students? These are kindergartners and really kindergarten. Would you tell them about how you start your work every day? So, I came there and I decided I would show them that I change my clothing when I come into the studio. And then I told them about that. I sit and think for a while. I do some sketching, and before I actually when I'm starting a new project, I think about it quite a lot. But the kids, the thing they were most blown away by was overalls that I put on. And they were more interested in my overalls than anything else I talked about. So the overall, I mean, I don't wear overalls anymore, but I have different clothing that I wear when I'm there, but it's usually, I think about a project in my head for weeks, if not months, before it actually happens. I just finished a series of 3 bronzes that were done. I was given the last 2 pieces of steel from the MTA. I was given it, and now that I did 3 memorial lights. One is at Trinity School, one is at the 9/11 Museum, and one is at NYU's Gray Art Center. And that was a story. I was given the 2 pieces of steel, and it took me 4 months before I figured out what I would do with them. So it depends. Sometimes the idea comes with me in a day, and sometimes it takes months. So each project, I love getting commissions because it makes me stretch. So it's very different when I have a commission or I just want to do something on my own. The Omer counter, I don't know if you've seen it, it's in the exhibition too, is a very well-known piece of mine. My bar mitzvah speech was on counting the Omer. I was 13 at my bar mitzvah. My first piece I did when I was 48. So that took me it took me 35 years to figure out how I wanted to do it. I don't think I've ever spent so much time thinking about something until I did it. Sky and wind, it really depends. The process is thinking a lot and sometimes sketching. Very often it's taking photographs. Using photography very often helps me get moving.
And people could see on the paintings based on your photographs at the museum. So again, if anyone's local,
Right.
please come on down and see the exhibition in person. We have another question in the chat. This person asks, this is a big question. What do you hope your legacy as an artist will be?
Leaving the world a better place than when I came, and that my work brings solace and comfort. And I've always felt like every artist has a mission statement. My mission, I mean, I love Mark Rothko, and I could give you, I have like 100 artists who are my top 10, but I feel the fact that I knew at the age of 6 that I wanted to make art, and I've been making art since then. But the fact that I went to a Jewish day school, and then I studied in seminary for 3 years, and then I went back to art school and knew how little I knew because the day school I went to did not have an art program. So when I went to Hunter, I wanted to learn how to do everything. So I took classes. My major was photography and printmaking, but I took weaving with Gail Wormer. I studied ceramics with Karen Carnes, Susan Peterson. I studied with some of the greatest artists, and I tried to learn. I did puppetry with Kermit Love. I didn't ever want to feel that I couldn't do something because I technically wasn't able to do it. So I wanted to learn how to do as many things as I could. And I wanted my knowledge of Jewish thought to be as strong as my knowledge of art history. So, if I would take something out of this, I would say I'd like my work to be known as somebody who believed in healing the world. I take that seriously, and I want the work to resound in every faith-based world, not only one, because I think if you really believe in something larger than yourself, it doesn't matter what faith you come from, as long as you want to make the world a better place. That's my goal. So that's, and I don't, people say to me, do you like sculpture better than painting? And do you like doing environments more than that? I like doing whatever I'm doing at the moment I'm doing it. And as I said, I'm very blessed with a huge studio. It's 8,000 square feet. I work on 10 different tables at a time. Sometimes I'm working on more paintings, and sometimes I'm working on more sculptures. It's whatever I'm doing at the time is what interests me the most.
Thank you so much. And we have another question. In the pieces you showed tonight, some were actual spaces and some were objects that helped create a meditative space for the viewer or handler. How do you think of this difference?
Oh my God, whoever asked that, thank you. It's like I asked the question to be able to, thank you for asking that. So I have always felt, I love Chinese miniatures. I like miniatures but I also like environments. If I were given unlimited funds, I would still continue doing my very small works. But if I had unlimited funds, I think I would do more large scale pieces. I now try and do at least one very large installation every 2 years, because those things take me so much time, and it's involving so many other people. I have to work with engineers. I have to work with lighting specialists. I have to work with the state or the city. I have to get permission, all these different things that make the work work. But I love that question. I like doing both equally. I mean, since 1993, every 2 years, I've done some other large piece. I mean, Jane Blaffer Owen, I always thank her immensely. She was the first person that gave me the permission to start doing large outdoor pieces. Until then, even if I did a large piece, it was always indoors. And for all the artists there, find yourself somebody who's going to be a patron, who really wants to help you grow your vision. But yes, I do like doing both. And I see them as different because sometimes you're more involved in a different way, but I'm equally involved in everything. But when it's larger, I have to think about, does it rain there? What type of foliage is it? Is it going to be in gravel? Is it going to be in sand? Is it going to be in cement? It always varies depending on where it is. But if I do an indoor, like this, I told you, this space I'm doing now with water, it has to be in a large enough space that the piece is going to be 12 feet long, but 8 feet tall. And it has to be in a place that I can have lighting come in there. So when you do such a large piece, you have to think about the surrounding areas.
And we have another question on how has your style or approach evolved over the years, and what prompted those changes?
So I studied when I was a kid, I did a lot of woodwork and a lot of photography. While I studied abroad, I did photography books for tourism. I did a lot of portraits. I did weddings and bar mitzvahs early in my career before I went to art school. I had the great privilege of studying at Hunter with Roy DeCarava and Mark Feldstein. And my early work was I took photographs in the South Bronx of buildings that were coming down. And I was fascinated when you saw a part of a room and you saw a part of a bathroom and you saw the way the colors changed on the walls. I'd been very interested in work by Burri and by Tapies. And I like that very texture-oriented work. And I felt that in the South Bronx, I could go to buildings that were being destroyed and bring my paints, oil and acrylic, because it didn't matter because it was being pulled down, and paint on there. And then I started photographing those things. By the time I was finishing up my education at Hunter, I had the privilege of working with some color field painters, and I became very interested in texture. And since I did printmaking, I would get the used print sheets, and there was something called Roplex, which is now people call it gel medium, and it was free. And I would take these pieces of fabric and cloth and different things from the print shop and glue it to a surface. And I started repeating what I had seen in the South Bronx as paintings. And then I became more and more interested in texture and how you can build up a surface. And I wanted my paintings to look more sculptural. And I wanted my sculptures to have a painterly feel to them. So I've always been interested in texture. I've always been interested in color, but over the years, my color has changed quite a bit. And I think it could be age related because as men get older, your rods and your cones. When I was younger, one of my dealers said to me, "Why do you paint so dark?" And I'd say, "They're not dark. When I look at them now, they were dark." But I didn't see it that way. So I don't think about what I do. My life is a continual conversation, and I just keep on doing what I do. I only realize how much it changes years later. In 2018, I had a student, I teach at the School of Visual Arts. I had a student that was a filmmaker of dancers, and she got me very interested in looking at the models that I had in my class. And for the next 3 years, I did over 120 images of dancers. And I still go back to that. And I got to flowers when my mother died 20 years ago. And then our two daughters and son got married, and they had beautiful flowers at their wedding. And I started doing more and more images of flowers. So whatever is in my life becomes part of my artistic conversation.
Thank you so much. And again, we are coming up to the hour, so I want to encourage everyone who has any questions to either put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will prompt you to unmute. But in the meantime, I'll read some more. How do you hope your audience will engage with your work? I think specifically for these spaces rather than objects. And are there any specific emotions or thoughts that you aim to evoke?
I want them to feel about who they are. I want to become almost invisible. I want to be a blank screen that gives them permission to think about what they think. I'm less interested in what I think, and I hope that I'm a good guide and I take you to a place, but I lecture all over, and I do a program where on sunrise, I take students to see the light changing. And they all say to me, what should we do? And I'm saying, live in the moment, take out your phone, don't even bring your good camera, take out your phone and document what you're feeling and seeing. And that's what I want to happen here. I want to make these places, that's why I'm so happy that Shalev, many people get married there. It's become a destination in New Harmony, Indiana, for people to marry. So with all my projects, I want you to bring your own narrative to them. That's really important to me. The reason I don't name, the only thing I've ever named in my work are sky and water, but they have another name also because the sky and water was so important to me. But when I have the body called flower paintings, they're not called flower paintings. They each have different names that my wife, Nessa, helps give me. And I've done things on trees, and I'm very interested now. I read this book on how trees talk to each other, and whatever hits me, and then I start doing work based on that.
And you mentioned multiple times, someone notes about how both your faith and your religion and faith in general plays into your work and your creative process. Do you find that art making and art experiencing is a religious or faith experience?
Oh, for me, that's how I pray. I mean, making art is how I pray. And I'm going to end with talking about my mother. And everyone always says, how long does it take to talk about Ellen? So Ellen was my mother, and I thank her profusely for the career I have. When I had the show at the Guggenheim in '85, my closest artistic friend at the time was somebody I went to art school with, whose name he lives in California. His name is Rafaela Camatante. And she said to me, I'll never forget this, at the museum, don't think you're so great. If Ellen had been my mother, I'd be having a show at the Guggenheim. So she made me who I am. And when she died 20 years ago, it was among the worst times in my life. And I didn't know what to do. I had decided I'd go to synagogue and say Kaddish 3 times a day. It made me miserable. And I came up with the idea that I would continue doing that, but I would do 11 projects in her memory. And I went to institutions that had asked me to do things, but didn't have the funding to do it. And I said, I'll make you a deal. I will do it for you for half price. I just want you to write in the document. I don't want a plaque. I don't want anything like that, because my mother would have hated that. I just want in the document to say the artist did that in memory of his mother, and that is why we're able to do this project. So I did 11 projects, and why 11 is because you say Kaddish for 11 months, and that became my Kaddish.
That's beautiful. And I hope that people can, even if they're not makers, that they could kind of experience art in that meaningful way as well. And if there are no other questions, I want to end with our last one. And so everyone think if you have any more questions while I'm asking this one. Any advice for up and coming artists?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Nancy Johnson because she's on here. Nancy,
There she
you
is.
such a joy to work with. Oh my God, everyone should have a curator like her to work with. It was pure joy. What is my advice to younger artists? Make work, make work, make work. Don't think about what the trends are. It's always going to change. Do what your heart tells you. Always find, I always say, if you're drunk, sit down. If nobody is looking at your work, then maybe think about it again, or maybe think you're looking at the wrong audience for looking at your work. But don't let the marketplace make you change what you do. Everything changes. Everything changes. Even things like Corbusier, or I mean, I could think of so many great people, or, there were École de Paris. The Impressionists were not the Impressionists when they were doing. Bouguereau was the guy. And now, I mean, he's coming back in again, which I'm happy for him. But I heard stories. I knew somebody who would collect the frames of Bouguereau because they were so beautiful, and they were throwing out Bouguereau paintings. So don't think about the marketplace. Make art that's honest. Make art that you believe in, and find a day job so you're not starving. That is really important. Don't starve. Starving is bad. Find a way to make a living. I found a way to make a living by teaching, and I'm thrilled I did. But I don't believe everyone has to do the same thing. And you might be a good waiter, or you might be a good chef, or find something that doesn't draw. Or I know people when I went to art school that became postal workers, or become a nurse, or find something that you love doing. If you can't find a way to make a living right away, find something that you don't feel too uptight.
Starving is bad, art is good. That's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from today.
Well, that's perfect. I couldn't have said better.
Thank you very much.
I hope you all come back 2 weeks from now. It was really a treat for you to come tonight, and I hope you come in 2 weeks.
Please do. Yes. October 1st, 6 p.m. is Tobi's next virtual program, all about Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year objects. Again, you can go to our website, eldridgestreet.org/events is our events calendar. You can register for the program there. But I'll also be sharing that program with everyone who's registered tonight. So you haven't heard the last from me, for sure. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Tobi, we can't thank you enough for doing this for us and for doing this show with us. Every day I come to work and I get to see your pieces, which is wonderful. And I can't wait to do this program with you on October 1st.
I hope so too. Please tell people to go see the show. It's the longest time I've ever had a show anywhere. I don't think, the fact that it's not at the Neuberger or a major museum doesn't mean it's not a very valuable exhibition. And the good news is it's small enough that you can go out to a great restaurant in the neighborhood afterwards, or meet a friend, or do other things that day. But I'm very proud of it. And Nancy and I worked very hard to pick the 48 pieces that were in the show. And I think it holds up. I really do. And if you can go to, what's his name? Bloomberg has a great app, and you can see that. Maya, you did a great job. I love what you said. Don't starve and make art. I'm going to take that away. I love that. Anyway, have a great evening. Take care.
Have a great evening, everybody. See the show and come back on October 1st on Zoom.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.